Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of American Mood Swings podcast, where we talk about the brain and all things mental health. I'm Dr. Janice Morrow, and today's guest is Denise Isaacs. She is a very well-known and experienced divorce attorney in Florida. I started following her on social media. That's how we connected. And I really liked her presentation and style of the way she presents information. It's very helpful. So anybody out there going through a divorce or has a family member or friend, I think you'll really get a lot from this conversation. So thank you, Denise, for being here. So let's just talk about like how you got into this. I think I had heard you on another podcast that you had an aunt, that your favorite
Right.
aunt, and she got divorced. She had three kids, and it sounded like it didn't go well
Right.
for
And
her.
her and I can remember lying on the couch and listening to her crying on the phone with everybody all around her, and it really I just really wanted to help, and I guess that's how I got into family law. Also, when I got into family law, or when I graduated, there were only six out of like 100 and something students, 112, only six women. So 2 years later, it was like 30 or 40%, and then it became 50% years later. But
You have some really good advice for how to even go about finding a divorce attorney. I know that when my brother in Hawaii got divorced, I think he just called someone and it turned out he really wasn't a family law or even a divorce attorney. He ended up handling it for my brother. But, I
you need
wouldn't know.
experience.
Yeah,
You need experience. You need to get a lawyer who has a lot of cases under their belt, who has done either exclusively family law, because I do exclusively family law, or at least 70 or 80% of their practice is family law, because they need to know it, and they need to know the judges, and they need to know the law. Uh, Family law, which is divorce law, changes all the time. It just changes all the time. Paternity, alimony. You need somebody who settles their cases. They need to settle at least 95% of their cases. But they should know that if they get somebody who is unreasonable and is never gonna settle, they're going to be paying for nasty letters back and forth. It's crazy. But people who are going through it don't understand. And they feel that, oh, somebody comes into my office and they say, I want to do this, this, this. I want to serve him at the Thanksgiving table.
oh,
I want, and I'm going to serve him at the wedding so that everybody knows they're not my client. They're
that's
not my
awful.
client, and they need to rethink what they're doing, because anger makes the divorce go on and on. It like makes it two or three times as long and two or three times as expensive. And then afterwards, they blame the lawyers. Well, you can listen to your lawyer, but you have to. My clients know what is right. Okay, they know it. And who said the difference between like divorce and criminal law? In criminal law, you get terrible people at their best, and in family law, divorce, you get great people at their worst.
Oh, I've never heard that phrase. I wish I could remember their name. A year or two ago, I live in Los Angeles, so these high profile entertainment divorces, to me, they're just so unbelievably vicious. I don't get it. They
And
put the
it's so unnecessary, and
so
it's terrible. It's terrible for them. It's terrible if they have families. It's terrible for them, and it's terrible for the other party. It doesn't have to be like that.
Well, and to your point, I just don't remember who it was. There was a woman who was served. She was on the press junket, when they have a movie or a new project
Oh,
released.
right, right. I read about it. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, and somebody got served, and everybody initially you're like, what a jerk her husband is, what a complete to do that. But there was a little part of me that was like, well, I only know we're only hearing one side. Maybe she was one of those people that avoided being served. I don't know. It seemed
You can
unnecessary.
serve her any other place. You stake it out and you have somebody serve her as she gets out of her car. You don't have to do it on a stage. That's terrible.
It it it,
That's terrible.
it did
It's
seem.
demeaning. It's disgusting. Okay, so you know, but there are people who are, but it's only the 10%. It's the 10% of, corruption. It's the 10% of police who are bad. It's the 10% of divorce clients who are crazy. They just want revenge, but it's who they are. And it's the reason that the divorce is going on is because they're miserable, nasty, vengeful people. 90% of everybody else gets angry for 90 days. I let them get angry for 90 days. After that, it's time to cut to the chase, figure out what you want to focus on, what your top priorities are, what your goals are, and then get to it, you know? And I'm at a point in my career where I am not interested in the crazoids because they take over your practice, they take over your life, they want to call you at all times, and everything is drama, drama, drama. You know, there's a word for it that everybody like reacts to, which I don't like the word very much, but narcissism. Okay, narciss the narcissists, they're just no.
Right. Well, I don't even know. I know myself, I could not do your job. When I'm even, for some reason, airports seem to be a spot where people really get down and dirty and argue. I guess it's the stress of travel, but I can't tell you how many times I've been behind people and there's a nasty, vicious argument thinking, well, all kinds of thoughts like, oh my God, I'm glad I've never been married. I couldn't take it. It's all I can do to say, just get a divorce already, call someone, don't treat each other. But, anyway,
I say go to therapy.
yeah.
Go to
Oh,
therapy. Go
that's
to
nice.
therapy.
That's nicer. Yeah, do something you throw out there. But since this show's about mental health, my goal about having you as a guest is to try to what are some strategies and tools people can do to make it less hellacious and vindictive and bitter. And so one of the you talk about like some of the worst mistakes people can do is fighting in front of their kids, telling them and I know I have seen so many people do that for years and years. They badmouth the dad, badmouth the mom, and it does seem it's ugly to watch. And I can only imagine how the
It's
kids.
terrible, but it goes worse. What they do is they go to the children are being picked up by the bus and they're talking to strangers, really, neighbors, not friends. Um, One of my initial videos was to keep your lips zipped and only talk to one person. Only talk to one person. You can just let it all hang out to one person, but not because if you tell Jimmy's okay, so your son is friends with Jimmy, and you tell Jimmy's mother something. Jimmy's mother is going to tell Jimmy's father in front of Jimmy, and then Jimmy's going to come back to your son and tell your son exactly what his parents said. Exactly. And the kid's going to be mortified. Mortified. There is no reason for it. As angry as you are, you need to be an adult and you need to think about the consequences. The consequences of these fighting is that we know people. We know people. Their parents were nasty, fought like crazy, were divorced, had these knockout, drag out fights. And what do their children do? They don't want to get married. They don't want to have children. And it's a vicious cycle. It's just a vicious cycle. And you're a role model. You want to be a role model. You want to help your children's mental health. And then, you know, um, you need to have a support system. You need to have a good non a good experienced lawyer who doesn't want to fight over everything. the pots and the pans. No, who cares? You need to have priorities and push for your priorities. And
I
mental health, you need to have an experienced lawyer, you need to have a therapist. Anybody who is going through a divorce who doesn't have their own therapist um, shouldn't be in my office because mental health is so much, it's so important. People cannot sleep. They cannot sleep. The anxiety and the worry and all these everything that every trauma they've ever been through, every time that anything bad ever happened to them and they were powerless, there they are in this divorce with somebody getting a letter that you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right. The child got sunburned.
oh
You shouldn't have the children anymore, because you didn't put on enough sunscreen or you didn't put on any. Generally, it's not enough, okay? And you were out all day because you were having a really good time. They can
wow.
make every little tiny little thing and blow it up so that you look like a monster. And that's what people have to deal with. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And if they only could get to mediation quicker. But there are lots of people who don't want to give up control of money. They don't want to give up the statements, the documents, the 401k statements, the investments. They don't want to, they have boats, they have airplanes, they have fancy cars, and they won't agree to this, they won't agree to that appraiser. It like goes on and on and on. So um, there are the nasty people who want revenge, and then the second category is people who want to hide everything. Hide everything. Oh, there's an IRA and a 401k. We're talking about, $500,000 that they don't want to provide the documents for, but the pay stubs have a little thing on the bottom right corner that says that they put in X amount of dollars in there. Like you have to be an idiot not to know it?
You know,
Oh.
years ago, I was a teenage well, I was a teenager when this movie came out. It was with Whitney Houston called Waiting to Exhale. And I vaguely remember I was sitting there with my mom, and one of the characters in the movie was getting divorced. It was pretty nasty. And she found out her husband had another house in a whole nother state like you did. And I remember turning to my mom. I think I was like 13 or 14, like, how would someone do that? They can actually hide just not a naive little teenager. And she's like, oh yeah. But that kind of segues into the next area I wanted to
I
go.
love the movie. I love the movie. But
Oh,
I want to say one more thing. About 6 months ago, there was a Florida man, okay, who married one woman, okay, and then 6 months later married another woman in another county because Florida didn't have marriage statistics in one place. And then he had the nerve to marry another woman. Okay, so he's committing bigamy, but he's really stealing them blind. And so you ask, how could somebody do this? And then wife number one, was thinking and she did the homework. She had to go to different counties because it's public records, but the public records didn't have everybody by name. And I think now they've adopted something so that all the counties are in one place so that you can see if someone was married before. Oh my God, having, waiting to exhale, having another family, that money is draining off. And him, oh my God, oh my God. People ask me, I've been practicing for 46 years. Have you seen it all? No, no,
whoa.
haven't seen it all.
Wow. And you still and well, I'll mention that I did see that you are still happily married, which is beautiful because you think that people in this field, but
Right.
40
44 years.
beautiful.
44 years.
Yeah, like
Knock wood.
beautiful. Well, yeah, I've heard you say that one of the worst things women can do is not keep separate, have some of their own financial independence. And I was just talking with a friend last night. She's my first sister-in-law, and she and my brother have been divorced for four. He's on wife number four now. So, but she and I are still friends to this day. It's great. And she's then remarried. So I was telling her about you and how excited I was. And I asked her, like, what do you guys do for finances? And she said, for 25 years, they just have everything together. And I kind of cringed because I've never been married, but even the thought of like not having my own, I could never, but
Let's go back a couple of centuries, okay? The women in Russia, I'm way back, my great grandparents came from Russia. They never knew when there was going to be a pogrom. You know, they didn't know what was going to happen, or if their husband would divorce them or just walk away or die. They needed to have something. So they had a little handkerchief. And then what they do is they put the money in, they'd save and keep the money so that they could put it in. If they had to flee, they could just put it in their dress pocket and run away and have financial safety. Even if their husband was alive and everything was wonderful, you never know what's going to happen. Here it is, 2025. You never know what's going to happen. You never know. You know, look at what happened in California. Everybody lost everything. There were terrible fires. There's something bad that's going to happen through interactions with people or the climate, you know? You never know what's going to happen, but you need to have financial safety. As far as I'm concerned, in your brain, if you don't know that you have financial safety, people come into me all the time, especially women come into me all the time, and they say, I don't have any money for the divorce. You know, they're married 20, 30 years, 10 years, and they have no idea about anything, and they wouldn't divorce their husbands because of finances. And they probably give in to them and do whatever they want and just sit there and stew, which is another way of getting a divorce. Um, and 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 never their mothers never taught them that you need to have financial safety. You need to have money. I had this one lady, I represented the husband. I will never forget her. This is like a 20 years ago. She would go to stores, buy things, and then bring it back and get the cash. She would do the same thing in supermarkets.
oh,
And that's the money that she would take in. And then you could get additional money when when you went to the store, you know, so she would get that. And then, you know, this is before the ATMs. So for years, she was just, you know, gathering money so she would have money under her own control. So you can tell this is, I think I just did a video about this. You don't, the money that you have doesn't have to be a secret as long as the title on that bank account is only in your name, only in your name, so no one can take it from you. But then I have people who tell me it's in a joint account. Well, I cannot tell you the women, okay? The women who come in to tell me that he took $150,000 out of the joint account. Now he only gives her enough to pay the credit card bills, or he pays the credit card bills. It happened in an instant. She files for divorce. She didn't talk to her divorce lawyer about it because he would have said you need to, or she would have said, excuse me, that you need to have financial safety. You need to have financial safety. You need to take out half the money, at least half the money, if not all the money. And I cannot tell you, it happens every year, a couple of times a year, where the person has had the money taken out of their bank account, taken out of that joint account. Oh, everything is wonderful. We have money in the joint account. Yeah, till you don't have it in your joint account. You need to have it in your own name. Oh, I can't talk to him about that. Well, it's about time, you know, and you need to start earlier. So that's why I'm glad that I have my educational videos.
oh,
Really.
I don't,
So that people, before they even get married, I have a lot of people in their 20s who are my followers, 20s and 30s, but 30s they kind of are getting married. But they need to know in advance that they need to keep that money.
I can remember being a teenager. I grew up very Mormon. I'm still LDS to this day, but as a teenager, I remember hearing a lot of the women back in the 80s were still stay-at-home moms. And so there was like a one income family, and I'd hear them. And my mom had always, she had four kids and had her own business, a preschool for like 30 years. So she was always trying to stress to me, I don't care if you go to college, but I want you to be able to get a skill, go to trade school, you're going to do something, because she would see all these women in a terrible predicament for many
Yeah.
many scenarios. But I would hear these women at church talking about like, oh, I asked him for a dress, or I asked him for this and he said yes. But it would, as a 14 years old girl, it made my me cringe to me. Like I just couldn't handle having to ask someone, I don't know, for money. And my dad would be like, no, no, the honey, that's when you're married, that's okay. Your money's his money. But I didn't even feel that way as a teenager. Like I would never want to have to ask somebody permission. I mean, big
Right,
ticket,
right.
big ticket items I get. But
Yeah, big ticket items I get, I get, and to feel like a child with, or David Copperfield with a tin cup. Could I please have some more oatmeal? Could I please have some more money so I can buy myself a dress? Or I can, or even for the children, could I have some more money so I can buy them this or buy
oh,
them that? You
yeah,
know?
it would. There's a. I'm going to move on, but there is a comedian. I don't know if you do you know who Leanne Morgan is? She's a comedian from Tennessee. You got to look her up on Netflix. Funniest
Okay,
woman now.
I'll
Leanne,
write it down. I'll write
her
it
name
down.
her name is Leanne Morgan, and she finally made. She's been a stand-up comedian in Tennessee for 35 years. She's a grandma now, and she made it big in her 50s. It went viral. Her comedy went viral finally. And but apparently, so she was a stay-at-home mom. Her husband was a traveling salesman. And she jokes a lot. Any woman over 50, you'll love her, Denise. And she's clean. She's the cleanest comedian. And her career, she's got anyway, her career just exploded after this Netflix. But even she has a new special that just came out 2 weeks ago. And she still jokes about, even now that she's got like a sitcom, books, for years she didn't have any money, and now she's clearly making a ton. And her husband, she was joking that like now that she's on tour, he'll still tell her to share a room. Her daughter travels with her as her makeup artist, and he still tells her to share a room to save money. But I was watching that on the couch, like, I can't believe he's still telling her, because she's got to be making millions now, or hundreds. She's making a lot, and I was thinking, really, even you have your own money now, like what, you don't have to share a room if you don't want to. But anyway, it was funny.
Let me just intersect one other thing, because whenever you're talking about life, there's always something else. Something else is that this man was he was trying to exert some control over the budget. Let's talk about budgeting.
Okay.
Okay, both parties need to know if one is a housewife, a stay-at-home housewife, the other one is making the money. They both need to get together and have a budget. They both need to know how much he makes. I can't tell you how many women come into me and they don't know how much the husband makes.
Really?
Yes,
Wow.
yes, at
Wow.
least at
Okay.
least two or three a year,
Huh.
because and these are the men who want to keep, they think their only value is paying for things. So they want to make sure that they don't give her financial security, because then obviously she'll leave, you know? But getting back to budgets, okay, getting back to budgets. You, you need to have a budget. You need to know how much things cost before you get married, which brings me to prenups, okay? Which brings me to prenups.
Oh, you're segueing in. That was going to be my next topic. So segue, great segue. Thank you.
We're talking about prenups. Prenups educate you. People say, "Oh, I don't want a prenup. I don't want a prenup. Oh, why are you talking to me about prenup?" Meanwhile, every state has laws. Every state gives you a prenup. You just don't know anything about it. So the people who get prenups are smarter than the people who don't get prenups, because they don't know what state law is. Because state law determines support, determines how you divide things up, who gets the house, who gets the money, who divides up the debts, how you're responsible for his debts, or is he responsible for her debts? We got a financial affidavit that lists all the assets and debts from the other side, and it was like $60,000. My client, the husband, didn't know that she had $60,000 in debt and he was responsible for half of it. Okay, he was responsible even though he didn't know anything about it. You know, laws are so, every state you have a prenup, even if you didn't think you have a prenup. So, this is my advice. Okay, if you are married and you don't have a prenup, you need to do research. And maybe you need to go visit a divorce lawyer to find out what would happen if, God forbid, your husband divorced you or your wife wanted to divorce you. What would happen? Because there are laws on the books. They're there. You just don't know anything about it. And a lot of people worry. What if he divorces me? What if she divorces me? And they're trying to like do all this stuff. Then there are the people who come into me. He has his accounts, she has her accounts. They don't even do taxes together because joint taxes, you save a lot of money. Okay. They're not into that. He does his taxes. Everything is separate, separate, separate. And then when they come into me, I say, you're the saver, she's the spender. She has debt, you have assets. She's going to get half of your assets, and you are going to have to pay half of her debts. So, if you know this in advance, you can watch. You can say, oh, Amazon keeps delivering everything. Oh, here it is. Oh, you're getting all this stuff from Macy's. The back of the car, you walk in with, you're walking around with these 5-inch heels and they have red underpinnings. I forget who it is, but they're walking around. She has an entire room with fancy pocketbooks and fancy shoes, and you didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
You should have known. And if you knew at the beginning that you were going to have to pay her debts, okay, okay, let me just go back. I was giving they had education for high school seniors. Okay, so I was giving a couple of lectures to high school seniors. They are so sharp, they are so smart, but they didn't know that even if you kept it separate, that you'd have to pay for the other party's debts, their credit card debts.
Oh.
So I gave them a little hint. I said, this is what you do. When you're going out with somebody and they pull out their wallet and they have like a bunch of credit cards, that is a tell. Okay, that's how you know that this person has lots and lots of debt. Because they say, oh, then they're thinking, is this maxed out? Is this card maxed out? And before you get serious or even move in with somebody, you need to know what if they have $60,000 in debt and they're paying 23%. It's it's a rental payment. You'll never buy a house because they're always going to be paying off their rent, or they'll never be able to pay the rent because they have so much debt. And kids, they give out credit cards like crazy. On the campuses, they give out credit cards like crazy. You need to educate your kids to make sure that they only have one credit card and they realize that it's money and it's got to be paid off every month. So anyway, so I was kind of educating them, and
Right.
and and they sat there, looking at each other, okay, because they go out with each other, but you have to notice, you know, it's education starts earlier, and uh,
Well, great, great sentiments that the credit card things. I was curious because one of my patients I was working on, I've been a chiropractor forever, and he was telling me he's been with his wife now for like 16 years, but somehow we started talking. Oh, he was telling me he used to smoke, and a deal breaker for her. he had to quit smoking, and for her to marry him. So he hasn't smoked since. Yeah, that's how it came up. We were talking, somehow he mentioned that he had been a smoker. And he said my deal breaker for her, that she had credit card debt, and he wanted her to pay it off before. But I didn't want to be nosy, but I thought if like someone had accrued that debt before you were married, would he have, if he had married her and she already had 60,000 debt before, would he have still been responsible for it if they got divorced?
Well, this is what happens. Okay, so you pay off the minimum payment, and so you're paying it off, and it's 16 years later. It hasn't gone down, and it's marital debt by then because
Oh,
it's
got it.
been paid off. Who can figure it out? An
Got it.
accountant, I'm sure, might be able to figure it out, but the court, after a certain period of time, that is marital debt.
Thank
That
you.
is marital debt. A year later, it's not marital debt. You can make an argument. 2 years later, you can make an argument. 16 years later, ha, ha, ha.
Wow. No, he was,
Stuck.
yeah, it was
It's
interesting.
stuck.
It was interesting. Well, all right. Well, let's pivot. Thank you for the great information about prenups. Let's go in another direction. I have heard one other divorce attorney, he jokingly, but in a way, it's joking but serious. He feels that like Facebook, he said more people have gotten divorced since Facebook came around. What your in your all your experience, what you think, is it healthy to, can you have same-sex friends, or you think it's a bad idea? And then digital flirting as well.
Um, I think it is such a slippery slope. It's such a slippery slope. You know, someone that you vaguely know says this to you, and then you get into this and you get into that, and they're flattering, and flirting is like flattery, this and that, and then all of a sudden they're getting into really intense personal topics, and there's intimacy. It's there isn't necessarily sex outside of the marriage, but intimacy is um, and so what they're doing is they're distancing their spouse or whoever they have a relationship with, and they're having this weird non-personal personal relationship, because it's they haven't gotten together yet. They're just going back and forth, and it can be so personal and get to you. It's so hard. Oh, it's so hard. Oh,
Yeah. Do you think it's a
people
good
teach
idea?
me things. People
Would,
teach me things. So what do I think? I think you need to understand that it's fake. It's fake intimacy. Your mental health. They think that this person understands them. Well, believe me, ain't the case. It is not the case. It's but it satisfies something, and then it grows, and it can grow, and you can distance yourself from your partner or who you have a relationship with or your spouse. It's really dangerous. It's really, really dangerous. I remember, oh, my clients teach me things.
sure.
They the internet thing, this video stuff is like new to me, and I know that I have under a million followers. Okay,
What?
and in terms of Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, I really I was on Instagram like once every 8 years till I got into it. Okay. But my client came into me when her husband objected to her spending $800 a month on the internet. She was divorcing her husband because she met somebody on the computer, and I
Great.
couldn't tell you exactly how because I didn't understand it. It took me a while to process it. But she divorced her husband and then married whoever it was, that she had met online in a chat room. It was just amazing. And then you had to pay for every single minute. Now everything is free, you know? Uh, it is it's fake intimacy. It's fake because you're not one on one. You're a therapist. Mental health. Can you build your mental health on somebody that you've never met, that you're writing back and forth to, and then you're opening up and exposing yourself to somebody, oh, it's terrible. It's really terrible, and people don't understand. They don't understand it because they've grown up. Younger people have grown up in a world where you text each other. I'm going here, I'm going there. Oh, this is terrible. And then at night they're texting each other, and then they transfer it to the internet, to all of these Facebook, the other social
I know.
media,
Yes, I get
and
that.
it feels normal, but it's not normal. And
Oh,
only somebody who's as old as I am can understand, because it's part of their world. But it's not normal, and it doesn't help your mental health. What do you think? Does it help your mental health to have a best friend or somebody who you are having these fantasies about, who you never ever met?
Uh, I'm well, I do think a lot of it's fake. I've never used on this topic. So most people now, I see statistics and research on LinkedIn, like the number one way that people meet now is on dating apps. And I've never, I'm so old school that I like an organic, natural. I understand and I know I have plenty of people that have found their person and they got married, and then I know
Yeah,
people
me
that
too. Yeah.
got, but for me, I'm just like, I think everybody lies. I don't know. I just like an organic, natural meeting at the gym or somewhere else. But it's to your point. I mean, if I did meet somebody, they call it. There's a phrase that I learned this year. They call it love bombing. You know, when people just give you all this crazy attention. To your point, I think it's a little bit over the top. It's a little bit fake. If someone's start sending me roses every single week, it's too much. I don't know. It's just a red flag to me.
It's a
But
red flag. I did a video on it that's coming out in the next month or two on this love bombing becomes control, Oh, yes, I'm giving you everything, everything. And then you want to, and you're accepting it. Well, what do you owe? Because everything is a quid pro quo. Then they become controlling, and they start controlling your life and taking away your freedoms. So that love bombing, or the minute you get married, it's gone. And then the real person comes out, you know?
yeah, yeah, the before and after. I've heard a lot of
That
stories.
love bombing, that love bombing is just, if you think, it's too much, it's too much. And you need to be fearful. But it's so wonderful to have somebody giving you everything and telling you how wonderful you are, and how, yes, you did this and I'm giving you this, and you're so wonderful, you're so wonderful, you're so wonderful. And then little by little, they're taking over your life. And then all of a sudden, you're worthless because they set the standards, and they are the ones who told you were wonderful. Why am I not wonderful anymore? What's happening? It's terrible. It's hard that you need a therapist to understand what's going on. Why all of a sudden everything you do is wrong, and you just have to run after the other person and try to make up to them something that you didn't really even do wrong. And it just gets to be, it's just painful, very painful.
Uh, I'm a huge fan of background checks, and when when girlfriends will tell me they've met someone and this, I used to ask them, like, did you do, especially if they met them online, and they look at me like I'm the crazy one, and I'd look at them and think it's $300. How could you not? Like, $200 to $300, you can do little freebies on the internet, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
but for a good one, to me, I've only done it 2 or 3 times in my life, not on someone I was dating, other situations, but I think
yeah,
I'm a very practical kind of person. And I think, especially if you're thinking of marrying this person, and
right.
most
But
people don't. Most people don't.
yeah, but But there are clues. Okay, there are clues. Nobody comes into this world as an infant. You listen to what they have to say about their mother, okay, or their father, what their parents, their relationships with their siblings. And then you have to really listen very carefully when they're talking about their ex or their exes. someone who's been married 3 times, you have to ask what their relationship is. Usually they would have like children, what's your relationship with the mother? What's the relationship with the father? You need to ask very specific questions. And over a period of time, you will get to know. And if they say that they have nothing to do with them anymore, or they're this, or they're terrible, really? The last 3 wives were terrible and poor, pitiful you? Um, it tells you a lot. It tells you a lot, even more than, you know, doing paying somebody to do an investigation.
Well, thank you. Yeah, those are all
Right.
great.
Just like looking in their wallets, or seeing how they go to pay for everything. You have to pay attention, and I would take notes. Okay, that's what I would do. I would take notes, because if it changes from Monday to the next Monday, they said this, that, and the other thing, or if you have a really good memory, but I'd write it down,
Okay.
because how he treats his mother is how he's going to treat you. How he treated his horrible ex-wife is how you're going to be treated.
Do you
And
know, I
says
have
that she's bad. He says that she did this, she did that, she did this, she did that. This terrible, terrible person. And then, you know, you get married, and then you realize that the person is dealing with him,
that
dealing with his crazies.
on that note, I have it's usually the opposite, like what you said. I hear people saying vicious, and to me, I'm with you, that would be a red flag, especially how they treat their mother. If they have no relationship with their mother, I mean, there could be extenuating circumstances, but it's
There are,
generally,
there are. Okay, I'm not telling you
yeah.
there aren't. There are. There are some mothers. I just read this book by Erica. No, no. Erica Jong had a daughter, and the daughter's name was Emily Fast Jong, or Jong Fast, whatever. And it's, how to lose your mother. And she's talking about her mother, and her mother, you know, was a terrible mother, just a terrible mother. And, you try to come out of it, to realize what your parents did wrong, and try to like correct it with therapy, of course, with therapy, so
No,
that you can like look at everything.
you keep bringing that up, and I'm so glad because I think it's really healthy, and it's more and more men are talking about it now very openly. Not all, but compared to 30, 40 years ago, they'll talk about it, encourage each other, which I just think it's really healthy for
I
everyone.
think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful, because you need to have an objective person who doesn't have an angle, who doesn't, it's like your mother will tell you, oh, just work it out. That's not, first of all, you shouldn't ever go out of your marriage and say anything bad about your spouse to your parents or your siblings. It's just terrible to do that, because they're going to hate your spouse forever. They're going to remember forever. Even after you've forgiven your spouse, they're going to hate your spouse. Okay. And us. Oh,
One
so
of,
anyway,
one of the healthiest things I ever saw on that topic. So it was like 25, 30 years ago when I first graduated from chiropractor school. I did my internship with this guy here in LA, Dr. Vollers, and he was divorced with 4 grown children, and he happily remarried, but in his office. So it was silly to me. He had like a monster picture of his wife. I thought, oh, she probably put that up. It was a little too much for me. But he also had a little picture of his ex-wife where he kept other pictures. And I had never seen that before or after. And I thought at the time, how beautiful is that? And the current wife is okay, because that seems much healthier to me to have this. She is the mother of his 4 kids, and if they can have a normal healthy. It just was beautiful. I've never seen that before. Yeah, before or after.
right.
Um,
So how do you enter into a new relationship if you're so angry and vengeful at the past relationship? How can you be open to a new life and love and peace if you're invested in fighting and angry at your ex? No, it's terrible. It's just absolutely, it's like you're in this relationship, but you're looking over your shoulder at least 90% of the time. It
Killing.
interferes with your current relationship. It's really terrible.
I wanted to just talk a little bit about alimony because you mentioned that a lot on social media, well, at least a few times, and how I know that something there's a new law in Florida because I've never been a fan of like permanent alimony, when someone can work like forever indefinitely, and you mentioned Florida just changed that law. What are your thoughts as a divorce attorney on alimony and the length of it, and you mentioned a couple of requirements that even determine if someone's going to get it, like a need or something.
Right. So that if husband and wife both earn, he earns 80, she earns 100, he's not getting any alimony. They're if he's not getting out, they're about the same, you know, and he's making enough to take care of him and she's making enough to take care of her. However, there used to be a super standard that there isn't anymore, where if let's say that you were spending $40,000 a month, and so then you were married for 15 years, you'd want $40,000 a month from your spouse who could afford it for the rest of your life. And Florida would have it would have had to be over 17 years. Then you would get permanent alimony. What do I think about that? I don't think that's fair. I do not think that's fair. I have a minority of women, let's say of 100% of alimony cases, I would say that 30% of them are women who are paying alimony, who have the same attitude that men do.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
not happy. I have friends that pay it. They are not happy.
But
But
now Florida has said no more permanent alimony. But if you're married more than 20 years, so let's say you're married 40 years and it's 75%, you'll get, if you're married 40 years, you'll get, you'll get alimony for 30 years. Is it not permanent alimony? No, it's not permanent alimony, but chances are they'll both die before the alimony runs out.
yeah, yeah.
And then it's a percentage, but there has to be a need. And no longer, okay, there are people who divorced their wives. I'm just going to talk about it. Um, because they were spending money like crazy, just spending money like crazy. And you don't get alimony on crazy spending. So you say, oh, well, I spend $20,000 a month on um, procedures, and I need another $10,000 a month on clothing. No more. No more. The standard of living is not the epitome. It is not the only thing that they look at. It's supposed to be reasonable needs. And then there are even reasonable needs where where the guy can't afford it. He just cannot afford to live. And Florida says that stay-at-home moms have to go to work to the highest degree possible. So there's one case where the wife was a lawyer and she didn't want to do that anymore. She said that she could only, work for McDonald's. Well, the court said you could do this, 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 and this because she hadn't worked as a lawyer. So she could be a paralegal. So instead of $20,000, she could make $80,000. There's like, so it's called imputed. That means that the court said this is the highest this is the highest money that you can make if if anyone was in your circumstances, and we're going to say that that's how much you're making.
Wow.
But but when you give up your career early in life, you don't get you are some people do, but most don't. You can't get that back again. You just cannot get on that career curve so that you're making a lot of money. You can't get there.
Interesting.
So you've given up the best years of your life. You stayed home to take care of those beautiful children, those wonderful children who you raised, and you helped him. You were the plus one at everything. You made sure that everybody got their Christmas presents and this and that, and you entertained and you did everything you could for the husband. And so his career went like this, and here you are left with, you know, minimum wage.
Wow.
And in that case, I think that there needs to be support, and it needs to be for a long time. And usually, now it's the first 10 years, then it's 20 years before you're eligible for 75% time of the time that you were married. And that in terms of the amount, it's kind of it's become less complicated, but you'll get enough to live on without the husband having to pay for all of your, refilling another room with pocketbooks.
Great.
And you're not entitled to a Bugatti. You're not entitled to all of the stuff that you had during the marriage. The standard is not only the standard, it also is what your need is, what your reasonable need is. So it's a balancing act, and that's why you need an experienced attorney who who understands and can help you, because the have not, okay, there's haves and have not. The have not stay at home mom is going to be crazy, but I'm hoping that she's not going to pick a lawyer who is a battler, BATT,
That wants
no,
to fight. You
no,
mentioned
I'm
that
going to
too.
get you this, I'm going to get you that. And then 2 years later, there you are. You've spent a couple of $100,000 that would have been in your pocket if you didn't battle for everything, because you got to settle. You got to be reasonable and you got to settle.
There's a woman at the gym I'm friendly with, and she's been telling me when we're swimming in the morning. So she apparently was living with the man for years, and he passed away, and he had promised her like a life estate. They were never legally married, just living together. And she said his documents used to say that, but then his sister got him to change it, blah, blah, blah. So she's been battling for a couple of years. She told me just the other day she has spent she's trying, she would like, I said, Is your ultimate goal to live in this house?" She's like, "Not anymore. I would just like the 400,000." And I said, "Well, so you've been fighting for 2 years and you've spent 200,000. Am I hearing that
Oh,
to get 400?"
oh,
And I asked if he had any cognitive impairment. And I just from my own mother and father's passing, I mean, unless someone has documented cognitive impairment, they're legally allowed to change things shortly before they die if they want to. But
right.
it just sounded very ugly. I don't know how it will go. They were not legally.
It's ugly, ugly, ugly. It's like the Palimony case, Lee Marvin, and I forget what her name was. And she sued in California. It made headlines everywhere. Oh my God, palimony. He said that he'd support her, and then he didn't. And she was suing him for his verbal. So you got to get everything in writing.
Well, and I
If
remember
she
it.
had it in writing, he couldn't change it.
Oh, okay. I don't know, but it just sounded ugly. I wouldn't want to go through it. Well, I would like to kind of wind down. We've got about 10. I wanted to hear your thoughts overall because the statistics show that regardless, like if you look at the research, that regardless of how vicious and nasty someone's divorce was, like that 86% of people still get remarried within 5 years. And then the research shows that like out of those like 86%, 50% of them will be divorced within 5 years of their second marriage. But I'm fascinated, Denise, that like is vicious. And I have a friend, my oldest high school friend. We've been friends since we were 14, and he's been divorced now for like 15 years. And it was very vicious, went on forever. It didn't have to. And he did kind of what you were talking about. He had been a computer programmer, went to teaching to try to not have to give her as much, and the courts basically said, "No, you have to give her this much because you have the ability to earn this." So he was just very bitter, but and he talks about it, and I've encouraged him for years to go to counseling because we're in our late 50s. Like you've been divorced for her, and she's moved on, and you're in this awful place for his own peace. I'd love to see him get some help. But he still says that he would get remarried. And that really takes me aback. Like, what? I have not heard you've been miserable for 15 years. But anyway, most people are like him. And what are your thoughts on that? Like, why do you think that is? And do you
I
still,
want you to know that I haven't read um,
oh,
anything that said that 86% of people
oh,
get remarried. I haven't read that.
okay.
Um, I know that second, I, I agree because I've read studies that second and third marriages,
Go down.
yes, are just not successful.
So you've been happily married. So what are your thoughts? I don't know if you have kids or nieces or nephews. Do you still think it's a good, do you believe in like the institution still? Or do you think it's this
I
outdated?
do.
You do.
I do. I think that marriage is, especially for a young person having children, I think that uh, everything has changed, but I think that marriage offers so much stability, so much peace, so much love. I think that you need to have somebody who has your back. And I don't know, it can happen with living together. It can happen, but it's like it's like the ultimate choice that you have chosen someone and you're going to give your 100% when you get married. That's what I think about marriage. And it's still the same. And less and less people are getting married, and there's no stigma about having children out of wedlock. And but I think that marriage is very beneficial for both parties. And they say that men who get married live longer and are happier. And I think that women are also happy in marriage. So,
Those are beautiful sentiments. They're beautiful because I would be such a scaredy cat having gone through. I'd definitely be shell shocked. And what you mentioned, I've heard you talk about like a great age. You think 30s is a good age because talk about that
yeah.
and the
Okay,
thing.
it's a balancing act because of fertility. It's a
Oh,
balancing act because, you know,
mm,
getting married in your 30s, you have established a career. You know more, you've lived longer, you understand things better, and hopefully you've lived with your fiance for a longer period of time. So that fertility, I had a child at age 35. My sister had a child later in life. Um, I was an older mother, and I had fertility problems actually. Um, so it's a trade-off. So maybe 29, get married at 29, If you have lived for a longer period of time with your spouse, with your partner, the chances of your marriage succeeding are greater than if, you haven't lived together and you've known each other for 3 months and you get married and things, are not great and you have to get divorced.
well, anything else that I might not, I mean, we could probably go for 3 hours, but
Yes,
anything else that I didn't ask that you feel is really important and contact you because you
yes.
still are.
So my social media is divorce lawyer Denise, and on both um on everything. And I'm Denise Isaacs. I'm a divorce lawyer in Florida, and I it's a pleasure talking to you, Janice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I'll keep following and learning from your posts. I hope you have a great holiday. What part of Florida are you in?
I handle all of Florida.
Okay.
I have lawyers all over Florida, and I handle cases all over Florida, although I am in South Florida.
Okay. All right. Well, have a wonderful Christmas season and holiday, and
Thank you.
I hope to
Thank
stay in
you.
touch. Thank you.
Merry Christmas to you and
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Merry
Bye.
Christmas. Bye.